say, man, late game or drown.
Coach T with Gritty Boxing Talk. We got a lot to talk about. Danny Swift Garcia took on Errol Spence Jr. Yeah, he was the truth last night from round one up until the point where he even admitted that he got tired, like around the 9th round. But honestly, I will admit that I thought perhaps what Angel Garcia said concerning Errol Spence being a shell of himself. He said that he saw a man that wasn't 100%, Maybe he saw the same thing that many of us saw. And if you look at Errol Spence before the accident and look at the Errol Spence after the accident, there was a difference in terms of his speech. He sounded like he had a little slur in his speech. But that's not why I thought that Errol Spence could have possibly not been 100%. You had 3 factors. One was, and a lot of people are not talking about it, Errol Spence had a tough, grueling fight against Showtime Shawn Porter. He got hit more than he had ever been hit in his career against Showtime Shawn Porter. Showtime Shawn Porter basically hit Errol Spence everywhere. If anybody has seen Showtime Shawn Porter fight, anybody that knows Showtime, I don't care who you are and how good you fight, he's going to hit you. You're not leaving that fight without some lumps on your head, man. He can fight, regardless of, his style of fighting, which looks somewhat a little haphazard. But the point is, he has determination and he will hit you. Besides the car accident that I felt could have possibly been added to Errol Spence not being 100% himself. But the third factor is he had a long layoff. Okay, he had over a year layoff after the accident. Anytime you lay out over a year in professional fighting, that is a setback. You're set more than a year in terms of your ability. You're set back probably 3 years if you take a year off. And so Errol Spence came back and proved, well, not just me wrong, but he proved that he is the man still in the welterweight division. Regardless of that, I'm going to go on record as saying, and you heard it from me, Coach T, with Gritty Boxing Talk, nobody has to agree with me. That's why my motto is, we hold no punches. So if you don't like the way I view things, if you don't understand the way I view things, that's okay. I want you to feel free to take shots. This is what boxing is really all about. It's the give and take. It's the ebb and flow. It's the chess match. So I welcome any and every angle concerning the sweet science. But I still will say that I don't see Errol Spence Jr. defeating TC, Terence Bud Crawford. I don't see it. Why I say that? And besides that fact, Terence Crawford did weigh in on the fight. Yeah, he weighed in. He said he wasn't impressed. Now, every fighter fights up to the level of his competition, or some fighters. Every fight style doesn't match up the same. So maybe he's not impressed with Errol Spence's first fight back since the horrific car accident and the close decision win against Showtime Shawn Porter. A tough, grueling fight. Actually could have went either way. Some had Showtime winning. If Showtime hadn't got careless and got knocked down, perhaps we would have been seeing a different decision. However the case, I'm going to go on record, Coach T, I'm going to go on record as saying that I personally see Errol Spence Jr. as being a little one-dimensional. That's not taken away from his ability, okay? He has the ability to press you. He has the ability to box you. He has the ability to power punch you. Errol Spence is one of the most well-rounded fighters in all of the weight divisions. Out of all the weight divisions, Errol Spence Jr. is the most well-rounded, one of the sharpest fighters that we have seen within the last 2 decades. I will admit that to see him come back in such fashion and win so dominantly, actually, I'm very happy for him. That doesn't take away an aspect of why we call this gritty boxing talk. This is gritty boxing talk, okay? We're going to get gritty with it, okay? You don't have to agree, but I do see Errol Spence as being too one-dimensional for Terence Bud Crawford. He's a southpaw. He generally stays on his back foot the whole fight. He stays on his back foot. And if you watch Errol Spence, he has to be set to punch. Terence Bud Crawford is a switch hitter. He can fight right and he can fight left. He reminds me a lot of Marvin Hagler. But he also has a little bit of Sweet Pea Whitaker in him. You understand what I'm saying? He can really box you, and he can really make you miss and make you look stupid. But he can also punch, and he can switch up on you without you even knowing it. So I don't see, and even not just based on last night's performance of Errol Spence Jr. I've said this prior to that. I've said this 2 years ago, that Errol Spence was just a little bit one-dimensional. Once again, I'm not taking away from his ability to win. You don't have to be the most well-rounded. You don't have to be able to shift and use different angles to be the champion. You don't have to do that. Some fighters are very basic, and they manage to win based on determination. They manage to win based on the fact they have a good eye. They're able to fight with their eyes. They can time you very well. Some fighters can do that. Okay, you had fighters like Jermaine Taylor. Now I'm going to bring back Jermaine Taylor. Jermaine Taylor was a very basic fighter. I fought him in the amateurs, by the way. I lost. I thought I did pretty good the first couple of rounds, but Jermaine Taylor, he did his thing with that jab. But he was a very basic fighter. But he turned out to be a world champion. And he was a pretty good world champion at that. Remember, he beat Bernard Hopkins. He beat B-Hop. So he asserted himself well. He also beat Ronald Winky Wright. So he asserted himself well. But he was a very basic fighter. Very basic. So some fighters don't, they're able to use what they have very well. So if you have a good jab and you're able to use it very well, that's your dominant force in the ring. And no one, at some point, somebody will supersede it. But when it's your time, using what you have, it's your time. And so Errol Spence is that guy right now. What he does very well. He's not that easy to hit because he has a good guard. He's very aware of the position of his body. He's very aware of when he's punching. He's very aware of the angles that a fighter is trying to gain on him. He's very aware of his foot placement. He really is. However, slightly one-dimensional for Terence Bud Crawford. I see Terence Bud Crawford beating Errol Spence perhaps by late knockout, TKO, or I see him beating him unanimously. So that is Coach T's take on the boxing terrain right now. Errol Spence Jr. Beat Danny Swift Garcia in a very, very masterful fight. I will say that Errol Spence definitely is going to improve his first fight back since the accident and fight against Sean Porter. Why I say that is because he was very honest with his performance. He did say he got tired in the 9th round. And so in order to get better at the sport or anything that you're going through in life, any endeavor you are trying to accomplish, you have to acknowledge your limitations. You have to know when you lack in certain areas and just, either you live with it or you find someone that can either help you with it to get better at it, or you find someone who can do what you don't have the ability to do. And so in boxing, you are in there alone and there's not a team effort. The only team effort you have is really your coaching system, your management that helps to put the fight together. But they can't fight the fight for you. The coach can give you the instructions. He can give you a game plan. He can give you a great strategy to win. However, you're in there. You're the one that has to execute it. And so I see Errol Spence getting better. Errol Spence doesn't have a tendency to fight up to his competition. So I'm going to give him credit for coming back and fighting a tough, dangerous opponent in Danny Swift Garcia, who could easily knock anybody out in his weight division. He's one of the hardest punchers in that weight division right now. But as of right now, Errol Spence definitely is the man in the welterweight division besides Terence Bud Crawford. That's all I have for right now. Coach T with Gritty Boxing Talk. We will be airing live next Saturday for the Haven Brady Jr., his second pro fight. We're here in Albany, Georgia, the home of Haven Brady Jr. We're going to be airing live our young brother, who I believe is going to be one of the fighters in the lighter weight divisions from featherweight up to lightweight. He's going to be one of the fighters that people are going to be talking about. He's got a pretty good opposition, a pretty good opponent, a guy named Michael Land. I looked him up. He's pretty decent, fast hands. He's a southpaw, but he's nowhere near ready for Haven Brady Jr. So we'll be looking out for Haven Brady Jr. having his second pro fight. First fight was won on October 3rd, live at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. He put on a great performance against a Gowar Carrier, who was a pretty decent Philadelphia fighter. This time, Haven Brady Jr. will be fighting a fighter from out of Dallas, Texas. He won his last fight by knockout, but he's in for a lot of pain come next week, Saturday, December 12th. Once again, live at the MGM Grand. Haven Brady Jr. will be fighting on ESPN. Coach T, Gritty Boxing Talk. I'm out.